Hello.
We're good.
Praise the Lord. Welcome to All In with Valley Podcast, the podcast for entrepreneurs and business owners who are ready to create the life and business of their dreams. You guys, when I tell you tech has been giving us a time. Hello, Janna Cone.
Hello, we are here. I hope everyone listening can hear us now.
Please, God, let everybody be able to hear us right now. And Janna, you're the one who actually introduced me to this platform. It's called Riverside. And it's fantastic. I've had very little drama with it. But there has been 2 times now, the second time today, where we're sitting down to record and just things are not working. We couldn't hear each other. So we're just going to hope that this goes through. But I'm so happy you're here. This has been a long time coming for you and me. Well, at least for the past couple months, because we had you scheduled for, what was it? I think like March 1st.
Yes. Yeah. About a month ago.
And both of us were feeling that's about the time that I got sick. And then you were going through, what would you call that? A spell?
A spell for sure. A prolonged spell that I have been trying to get out of. And then I would find myself in the spell again. So yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. And the topic of our conversation, we knew this from day one, was we wanted to come on and talk about mental health and your specific personal experience with it. And we knew that's what we wanted to talk about. And it was kind of one of those things like, okay, what do we do? Because you were so generous and you were like, I'm game, I can push through. But I didn't want you just to push through. I wanted it to be a situation where you sat down and you felt really good about the conversation and where you're at. And, you get to decide whether you show up in, what people call the messy middle, or if you wait till you come out the other side with that added element of wisdom. And we ultimately decided that no, let's wait till you get through this, because then we can talk about it from a different place. So I'm really happy that we're able to do that today.
Me too. I think it was the right decision to wait. And when you reached out to confirm, and you said, how are you doing? And I was just straight up honest with you. And You're
so good about that.
I was like, I am doing okay. And I would never reschedule a podcast recording like this that's so important to me. But at the same time, because we have such a history, and I said, this is where I am, this is how I'm feeling, it could be powerful to do it right now, a month ago, but there's also power in sharing the story that, hey, I had to put myself and my emotions and my mental health first so that I could then step forward and do this recording with you feeling great. And it just worked out that way. And yeah, I could go on that, and I'm sure that we will, but I think we made the right decision in waiting.
Well, I think it's a really powerful decision. And right out the gate, you're modeling for people what it looks like to be honest about how you really feel.
Yeah.
And then taking action from that place, from that perspective of what's best for me right now. Like, yes, this is a cool opportunity, or yes, I already agreed to this, or yes, maybe some people are depending on me, but right now, what is best for me and my mental? And more into that conversation that day, I was like, no, let's wait. Like, I'm good. And I think if you just explain to anybody the way that you explained it to me, that like, I'm going through a spell. I've been through this before. I'm going to come out the other side. But I would feel more comfortable. I think it would be better to show up and do this later. Most people would be like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. But we've never been trained to talk like that. and to be honest like that. I love witnessing, and you have taught me so much around this about being honest about your feelings, because what I grew up witnessing and seeing modeled is what I've modeled for most of my life, which is like when somebody asks you how you're doing, you say, I'm great.
Right.
Oh, I'm so good. Yeah, yeah. It's like that automatic response. And you were just like, you know what? I'm going to be honest with you, not great. And here's why. I was like, hell yeah, that's a beautiful thing. So thank you for that.
Yeah. I grew up in that same school of thought as well. You don't really share your problems. And when someone asks, how are you? It's that automatic kickback response. I'm good. I'm fine. And I do believe there are a time and a place where that's appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
But with your people, with your safe people, with people that really do care about you and you in turn really care about them, put yourself in that other person's shoes is how I feel. And if someone that I love in my world was struggling, I would want them to tell me, like, please tell me. And so in everything I've been through, it has been my mission and platform, if you will, to just be real and say, this is how I feel. And what I have found is the more that I have shared, the more commonalities with other people that I have found where they say, oh my gosh, me too. Or I can so relate to that a couple years ago or a season in my life. And it has given me comfort for periods in my life where I have felt so alone and so ostracized in dealing with depression, especially as an entrepreneur. It has given me that common ground that no one likes to talk about. And when you are in any sort of mental health space and you connect with other people who have similar struggles, that connection and bond is like no other, because you've both been in the same dark place. So it can be uncomfortable, yes, but it's also incredibly empowering.
Well, because you're absolutely right. Like, by you being honest about your experience, you are now giving other people permission to say, hey, me too. That's how I feel. I relate to you on this level. And the more that we can do that and be honest about whether it's mental health or just struggles with motherhood or struggles with business, struggles with anything.
Right.
We start to realize that we're not the only one. We're not out here on an island. And when it comes to mental health, luckily we're in an age where more people are talking about it, but you don't really hear a lot of really raw conversations where people are that honest, because I still think there are some people who might be dealing with something and they're afraid to say it because they're worried about other people's perspectives and how they feel about them. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And especially if you are someone who internally is really struggling, but on the outside, things look pretty put together, or you are what I call high functioning, or you have a business that's booming. And even when you can look at it yourself and say, I have everything I once dreamt of, it's sometimes even worse when you're in that position, because you feel like the exterior looks one way, but on the inside, you are drowning. And so it's even harder to mask. And then you just go further and further in that spiral of feeling shame around, I shouldn't feel this way, to judgment of, what are others going to think if they know that I actually feel this way? I can't imagine how others feel. it's a sick cycle. And I think when someone can realize that whatever pain or bad spot they're in, that it doesn't matter. You can't compare your struggle and your situation to anyone else. Mm. You have to look at you and only you and see it for what it is and believe that you are deserving of feeling better. Not, hey, I know others have it worse, because that was something I struggled with for a really long time, of thinking, I know others have it worse. I have so much to be grateful for, thankful for, and I am, but I still felt like shit. It didn't hide that fact.
So you're saying you felt guilty because it didn't look like other people, but you felt how you felt. And you're like, I shouldn't be feeling this way because I have, on paper, everything that one could want.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a hard spot to be in. And I believe with everything in me that alone holds people back from one, admitting that they don't feel great and that they're struggling with something, whether it's depression, anxiety, ADD, ADHD, whatever it is in that mental health category. I think that comparison holds us back. I think comparing how we feel and what we have to others around us hold us back from actually taking a look and holding the mirror up to how we actually feel. And we think, well, I've gotten this far or I feel this way. I cannot then say that I'm struggling with this. And that's conditioning. And that's BS that we've been taught. Mm-hmm. And that's what I believe my part of my passion and purpose in this world is, to say F all of that.
Decondition the fear and the comparison and the stigma around these things. Yeah. So why don't we back up a little bit? Because I would love everybody to hear your story. And because you're a business owner, you've owned multiple businesses, you're now a podcaster, you're a mama, you have one of the prettiest houses I've ever seen in such a stunning location. But back up, I don't know how far you want to back up, but talk to us about what got you here, realizing that your passion and one of the many reasons why you're here and why you do what you do is to help people feel more comfortable talking about their mental health.
Yeah. So my story with depression and my journey actually goes back to high school. And I'm 35 now, and so I'm not going to take you back to high school. But in 2009, I had finished college, and that stands out to me as a prime moment in time where I realized something is off. I had freshly finished college. I had my first job, and life was good. I was living in Charleston, South Carolina, with my friends from college. Life was good. And I remember driving one day, and I remember where I was, downtown Charleston. And I thought to myself, I am in the worst mood. Why? Why am I in a bad mood? And that was a reoccurring theme that came up. And so when I was visiting my primary care doctor at the time, it was the first doctor ever that had really sat down with me and said, how are you doing, other than let's go through and have this physical, checklist. And I told him that. I said, I feel like I'm just in a shitty mood. And that is when everything began for me, where I opened up about it. I went on some prescription antidepressant at that time, Lexapro, and it served me incredibly well for a little over 5 years. I went through grad school on it. I felt such a lift in my life. I needed it. Mm. I am a huge believer in medicating. I'm not one of those mental health advocates that are anti-medication, because it has served me very well at different periods of time in my life. The thing about those medications is that they work for a period of time and then they stop working. And
because your brain chemistry gets used to it or changes?
Yeah, I am not well versed on the science really behind it, but I do know it is a fact that you build up some sort of immunity within your brain chemistry. Once you're, dumping extra serotonin or whatever it is into your brain, you get used to it. And so you have another baseline, and then you have a new baseline and you have to go from there. And so it's not uncommon to have to switch to another medication a few years in. And it's important, I think, to know that, and also important for the people in your circle to know, those that you feel comfortable with knowing, that you are on medication, so that when things maybe start to slip a little bit and become dark again, hey, maybe I need to have another little medication change. And so those medications served me very well. I, felt like, and still to this day feel like, antidepressant medication wise changed my life. I never saw how dark things were throughout my life until I got on those medications. And it's like, you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah.
So went through different periods in my life. I started a business, and the common cycle, regardless of what medication I was on or what was going on in my life, was that I would be good for a time period, and then I would slip back into a period of darkness. And so I always felt like, oh my gosh, I'm here again. And I've gone through that recently, where you feel like, gosh, I've taken 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. But I just always kept a pulse on how I was feeling, regardless of medications that I was on and, therapy and stuff like that. I just always kept a pulse on how I was really feeling. And those closest to me also were in my corner and knew that I was susceptible to depression. And so that was something that I always kept tabs on. And as time went on, I tried some different medications. And then most recently, this past fall, I really fell into a time period where things felt really dark again. And at that point, I had tried Lexapro, Wellbutrin, Zoloft, a few other medications. And I just started thinking, okay, there has to be some other treatment out there now. Not that I wanted to go off of medications, and I'm still on them. So I'm not shouting that, but in the past couple years, more and more has come to light. And it has become more and more acceptable to talk about your mental health issues. And so anyone listening, I'm sure, has seen and heard all of the new education and developments on psychedelic treatments and medications that aren't necessarily approved for the treatment of depression or anxiety, but they have shown to be favorable for that. And so this past fall, I discovered ketamine infusions for treatment resistant depression.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that this past fall, and it was very intense. And I've, have documented that whole process on my Instagram, but it was the boldest decision that I have made in terms of having my own back.
Mm.
Because I knew I was ready for a new type of treatment. I was ready to try something new and different for myself. And I said, well, if this could work, then I'm willing to try it.
Okay.
And that was a big turning point for me this past fall. And that was when I really, I would say, became very public about my struggles. Up until that point, my close circle of friends and family knew, but I pretty much kept it tucked away and saved for those, small group of people. And then I started sharing publicly about what I was going through and the treatments, and it opened up a whole new world for me.
Yeah.
And I think it's been very healing for me in that way.
Okay. I want to hear a lot more about, we've covered so much with that. So I've lots of questions for you.
Yeah.
So you said, like, going back to the first time you realized that you have depression, it was in college.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, I really don't know. Do most people realize or notice depressive episodes younger? Did you notice anything, or did you just not really realize did you just cop it up to hormones or, teenage years? Or was it just one of those things that sometimes it can hit people at different times?
I'm not sure about age range, especially as women, when we realize it. But for me, I absolutely think I had depressive tendencies in high school. Even I can remember periods of time just feeling kind of gloomy. And then in college, I think I was so distracted by the friends, the partying, the extracurricular, the schoolwork. I just stayed so busy and I was surrounded by people all the time. I think when life kind of calmed down for me right after college and I kind of entered the quote unquote real world and the dust kind of settled around me and I was alone more and a little more independent, that's when I realized, hey, I think something's up. Is wrong. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then you've also shared too that you have ADHD.
Yes.
How old were you when you were diagnosed?
Yeah. So I was 32 when I got my adult ADHD diagnosis. And that was a shocker.
Yeah.
It was a total shocker because I grew up thinking, and people listening may believe this too, that anyone with ADHD or ADD is just bouncing off the walls in school and, doesn't do well with schoolwork and they're talkative and just all over the place. That's not necessarily the case. It can just be hyperfixation on anything. It doesn't have to be that you're actually hyper. Mm. So I had that diagnosis, and I do believe that it goes hand in hand with the depression. Because if you think about the cycle of feeling like you have, it can present itself in a few different ways, but feeling like you have some grandiose, amazing ideas, but actually implementing it from A to Z, start to finish, is a struggle. Or it might be that you just feel like you will never get all your ducks in a row, no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
or you feel like, well, I will just never actually reach that maximum potential that I know I have because I can't get my shit together.
Mm.
And if you couple those thoughts alone and you think about that, which identifies as ADHD, and living in that cycle and those thought patterns, like, of course anyone would be depressed feeling that way. Of course you would. And so it goes really hand in hand. And I've learned so much about my depression because of the ADHD. It's really been incredible for me.
I listened to a podcast not too long ago, and unfortunately, I didn't think I was going to mention it on here. Otherwise, I would have gotten the name of the woman who was sharing her experience. And she shared, she had a kind of different experience where she was younger when she realized she was depressed, and she got put on a pretty heavy dose of antidepressants to the point that she couldn't just stop. Like, there was no like stopping cold turkey. It was one of those things. And she was severely had suicidal tendencies. And, but the problem that she faced was that she became so dependent on these antidepressants to the point that she couldn't, it was really hard to switch, and her life was on the line. Like, if she didn't titrate down, and, and her argument was because she ended up somehow getting off of them. And by the way, I will link the podcast episode that I'm talking about. I'll just have to go find it. I believe it was on Skinny Confidential. So if anybody's interested, you can go listen. But, her argument was that some doctors are so happy to write prescriptions, especially to young people, but there's no end game plan. There's no like, hey, we're going to do, this much for this amount of time. It's like, we're doing this now because it makes sense for right now. But then there's no forward thought, or at least in her experience, there was no forward thought of like how addictive this was and how much it altered her brain chemistry. So it's interesting to hear different perspectives of how, like, for you, it was such a gift for you. But do you think, like, how do you feel about the fact that you did have to go from different medicines because eventually it lost its potency? What's that been like?
Yeah, I absolutely relate to that. And it's actually very scary. So I want to listen to that episode myself, because when my prescription sometimes has, run out and you can't get to the pharmacy, or they don't have it for a day or two, my head feels so swimmy. It feels like my brain is floating inside of my skull, is the only way I can describe it. And I know that no one has experienced that, that sounds crazy, but if you have experienced it, you know exactly what I mean. And it is very scary to think that a pill that you are taking every day is affecting you that much. I can go barely 24 hours by missing a dose before I actually feel it physically. And that's not okay. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's typical and expected, but that is such a good point, and it's exactly right, because there is no plan. I mean, you can get off of these drugs and they can titrate with another drug, which I've done. But yeah, it's absolutely a consideration that there is a dependency there that develops 100%.
So was that was one of the reasons why you started pursuing alternate forms of therapy?
Yeah, because I just felt like every time I went to the doctor, I was handed just a higher dosage of my medication. And that's what I've been used to for so many years. But I started thinking there has to be something else out there that can have some effects on the brain chemistry. And that's when I found ketamine. And that's when I started reading about microdosing with magic mushrooms, which I've also done. That there are so many incredible alternatives to medication out there now, or you can do these alternative treatments in addition to medication, perhaps at a lower dose. But it is very difficult and it's so unfortunate. It's so hard to find a doctor who actually will work with you in being okay with knowing that you are pursuing these alternative treatments too.
Right.
And that's so frustrating. It's so frustrating because the access to care is not there. And it's so divided. There are two camps. There's either the camp that is pro pharma medication is the only way. And then there's the other camp of alternative psychedelic medicine, plant medicine is the way to go. But there's very little in between. Very little. Things are either way out there on the psychedelic front or way out there on the clinical medical front. And that's where I feel like I have had to bridge that gap between the two. And there's so much work left to do in that arena, but there's so much that has come forth in the past couple of years that have helped people. I mean, treatments that we never would have imagined several years ago.
So this past fall is when you started trying out ketamine treatments.
Yes.
And what led you to that? Because was it a doctor that was on board with alternate? Is ketamine considered this like radical approach to mental health, or is that still like which umbrella would that fall under?
So ketamine is an FDA approved drug. It's an anesthetic. They give it often in the emergency room for anesthesia. So given the fact that it is an FDA approved drug, people are more apt to not be so skeptical. Take that for what it is. Who knows? But it's in a different class than, say, psilocybin, which is just the technical term for mushrooms or any other psychedelics. So it was more accepted in the, I guess, medical community. It's legal. You can actually go to ketamine clinics. That's where I went, where they administered it by a medical professional. But what led me to ketamine was I went to a doctor's appointment and it was, hey, let's increase your Wellbutrin is what I was on at the time. And they wanted to double it.
Wow.
From 150 milligrams to 300 milligrams. And I really was just frustrated and thinking, okay, here we go again. Or just something in me said, there has to be another way. There has to be another way. And so I started researching and I actually found a podcast that talked about ketamine for treatment-resistant depression. And that term treatment-resistant depression spoke to me because I thought, well, maybe that is the label that I have because I've tried all these other drugs and nothing seems to be working. So that led me to ketamine. And then I started reading about it and researching and listening to podcasts. And my doctor, I just took it into my own hands. She wasn't against it. She wasn't for it. I just said, you have to be your own health advocate. Mm-hmm. And I said, this is what I'm going to do.
Okay. And you started those and you've done quite a few rounds.
Yes.
What they're called rounds. you've completed whole cycles, right? Really quickly, how does that work for people to understand it, for anybody who is thinking about it for themselves? Like what would like a round or a cycle look like?
Yeah. So it is a series of 9 different treatments, and the first 6 IV infusions have to be done. Typically, this is across the board within the first 10 to 14 days. So you really are signing up for quite a commitment for the first 2 weeks. And then that's your first 6 infusions. And then you have 3 others after that that are spaced out. And so you do 9 infusions within a time period. And then after that, you go into what's called your maintenance phase. And I've had 1 maintenance infusion since the 9, but that's typical across the board from all the clinics that I have seen. That's kind of the structure.
And it's intense because I remember when you were first doing this, I mean, there were full days when you would get these treatments that you would be out, like sleeping or emotional, or, I mean, it just depended, right? How it would affect you.
Yes. The nice thing about ketamine, and I say nice very loosely, is that the drug, the treatment itself does whatever needs to be done inside your brain. So it is a total psychedelic trip experience. Although you're monitored, it's in a safe environment, but it's intense. You don't have to talk with anyone through it. So it's not like talk therapy, which I think is really, I think a lot of people like that because they don't have to talk with someone through it. But the actual experience removes you from reality. And when you are in such a depressed place, that removal from your reality brings you immediate relief. And so it's different from going into a therapy session and walking out sometimes feeling worse than you did when you walked in.
You've been entrenched in these emotions.
Exactly. So the experience for me, the actual infusion is short. It's about an hour long, but afterwards I would sleep. I mean, I would go home and I would sleep until evening, and then I'd wake up for a few hours and then I would go back to sleep. But I've also talked to people that have had a different experience to where they don't sleep so much. I am a big sleeper anyway, in general. So I think that it really depends on someone's energy and, personality type in general, but it is intense. It's not something that would ever be encouraged as someone's, first line of treatment. But there are so many incredible options out there outside of medication being the first line of defense.
So a couple more questions about ketamine. What's the end game? So do you just continue to get maintenance doses, and the thought is is it reframing your chemistry? Is it making it to where you don't have to take other medications anymore? How exactly is it actually helping your depression? And then again, like, is it something that you would just have to keep maintaining over time?
Yeah. So what it does is ketamine as a drug goes in, works on your brain chemistry and creating new neuropathways. And so the way that I describe it is in our brain, we have neuropathways. Those neuropathways create our thoughts, create our habits, create our actions, right? So over time, someone that is depressed has these neuropathways that, if you want a visual, I think of like a fishing net. And those are our neuropathways. And over time, someone with depression, their fishing net becomes less and less strong. It gets frayed. What ketamine does is it comes in and strengthens back up those neuropathways that are depleted and also creates new ones. So your brain is actually changing and you're creating new neural pathways by way of the ketamine. And there's so much chemistry behind it that supports that, but that's the best way I can describe it.
Okay.
And so you walk away, and I think that's part of the reason I felt so exhausted, because if you actually think about what's happening in your brain, it's a lot. So I do that over your first, 9 infusions where it's pretty intense. But the thing about it is, and why it's so different than being prescribed a pill that you take every single day, is that it's different. After you have your first 9 infusions, you go into what's called your maintenance phase. And that can be different for each person. You may need a maintenance infusion every month. It might be every 3 months. I just did my 10th infusion. And the last infusion I had prior to that was in November. And so it's been, 3 or 4 months for me. So maybe quarterly is going to be my maintenance phase. But the end goal is that you get to where you need the infusions less and less, or you have more time in between the two.
Got it.
It's not necessarily to get off of the medications. However, if you want to, that's something that, your doctor could work with you through. But they even say that any medications that you may have been resistant to in the past can start to work better now that you have these neuropathways that are actually
interesting.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I wonder too, because whenever I think about or creating new neuro pathways, you hear that a lot with limiting beliefs and building new beliefs and affirmations, right? When you start to do something over and over and over again, you repeat something, or you're creating this habit because it's creating a deeper groove in your brain, a neural pathway.
Yeah.
So is there a way could you do ketamine treatments while also saying affirmations or something, positive that would deeper ingrain what you actually want to feel about yourself?
Yeah, I have read a little bit about that actually. There are ketamine playlists on Spotify.
Oh, cool.
That some clinics provide, and you can take your earbuds and listen to, might be the music, it might be affirmations. I think that would be something worth really exploring, because I know when I was in the height of my infusions, the creativity I had and the just complete on fireness and self-worth and magnetism I had was like nothing else.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah. I mean, you were a content machine. Once you got past those initial few treatments, you were just on fire with your message. And I think that's when it really clicked for you.
Absolutely. I never, ever, ever in a million trillion years thought that the thing that I have struggled with the most my entire life, the thing that I always wanted to stuff aside and hide or wanted it to go away, would be the thing that would propel my business and my message.
That's
forward.
Powerful.
Yeah.
Powerful. So this thing that you thought was a problem, or maybe you didn't use this word, but a weakness, or just something that you didn't want to share, ends up being a differentiator in the strongest way and in the best way, because it's just this point that it doesn't have to be negative. It just is.
Yes.
That so many other people also are. Right?
Yes. And for me, what also clicked during that time period is what was so hard for me was hiding the constant battle that I had with the depression and masking it. And so everything felt so hard. The way that I describe depression is like walking around with a weight vest on or walking through water and you're just not able to move as quick. That's how I describe it. But when I decided to just step fully into who I am, all parts of me, the part of me that struggles with mental health and depression, when I decided to also show that, it made everything else within me shine brighter and everything seemed a bit easier once I didn't have to tuck away this bear anymore. And it opened up so much in my world that I had just been keeping tucked away. It made it easier to be fully me and fully own every part of me. And that translated over into my business, over into my relationship, like with my partner, with my family. It was just all of me at 110%. And that has made such a difference.
We're going to talk more about how this has been playing out since you realized that this is something that you wanted to talk more about. But I, of course, have to circle back to the magic mushrooms and the psilocybin or psilocybin. Psilocybin. Yeah. What's the situation? What's the 411 there, sister? Yeah. Give it to us.
Yeah. So it's something that I feel like you're seeing all over now, which is crazy, but similar to ketamine, psilocybin, magic mushrooms have been proven to also change and create new neural pathways. That's what it does. And people typically do magic mushrooms in what they call a microdose, which is just a small amount that's not going to take you on a psychedelic trip. So I've done those in conjunction with the ketamine. I do them occasionally now with the help of a facilitator that kind of walks me through in a therapy session while using the mushrooms. And
Wait, so a doctor prescribed this?
No.
Okay.
There are coaches or mentors essentially that
I knew that. Yeah. I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah. That live in the mushroom world. And
mushroom
so, yeah. So they will do sessions with you, like a therapy session while you were on the mushrooms, and it helps emotions and thoughts and feelings come up so much easier. It almost opens the lid that you want to keep on the pot and it allows things to come up and out and move out of your body.
So you started doing those along with the ketamine. And do you still do that? Do you like it? What's your stance so far? And obviously, guys, we're not doctors. This is just Janna's personal experience. So we're not saying you go do any of these things by any means. It's just a conversation.
Right. Yeah, I still do them occasionally. I would like to do them more regularly. But you want to do it in the right way. For me, I want to do it therapeutically. And I just need to make more time to do it, honestly. But I am a fan. I think that it's hugely beneficial. The sessions that I've done and the therapy that I've done in conjunction with it has helped me move through a lot of baggage that I just needed to clear out.
It's interesting because I've never been diagnosed with ADD, depression, anything like that. But I mean, we all have our moments and things that we need to work through. And I've tried therapy. I certainly have plenty of things I should continue to heal as an adult and as a mother and woman who works with other women. There are things that I'm pursuing that, but it's like finding that modality that works for you. I've tried traditional therapy. I've tried a couple of different therapists. I didn't try very long because I'm a big fan of like failing fast, but like I did give it a fair shot and it just wasn't for me. But something about microdosing, I don't know why, but something about it, it feels right and it feels attractive and it feels safe. And especially if you compare it with somebody, and I think that's the thing, like when you're used to, I think my issue is I've spent my whole life just being high functioning and just like putting a lid on the shit, right? And just like move on, move up. But like there's still shit under the lid that needs to be dealt with. But it's like taking that lid off. It feels like there's a bunch of rust around it and that it's stuck. And it's like Pandora's box in a way. And it's probably this subconscious thing that I'm not wanting to open it because holy hell, are we going to be able to get out of it? Will we be able to close it again? So something about the therapeutic part with the mushrooms, it just, for some reason, it's appealing to me. So I appreciate you giving your perspective there.
Yeah. If I were to start over and say I was someone who felt like, maybe I have some depression or whatever it may be, or just want to see a therapist or talk to someone about my shit that I haven't talked to ever about, I would start with non-traditional methods, period.
Why?
Like mushrooms. Because one, way less addictive.
Yeah.
It's not something that you have to do every day for the rest of your life. And a lot of our issues that manifest and then we put a big label on it as depression are root issues that we have within ourselves that we've never taken the time to dig up and talk about. So I think if you take the time to dig it up and talk about it using something like magic mushrooms, if you can move through that issue, whatever that root issue is, if it is, I mean, as women, we have issues in business. We have issues with our family members. We have issues with money. We have issues with just imposter syndrome. I mean, everything. If you can find someone in your corner to work with you on those root issues and sprinkle in mushrooms or whatever it is that you want to try with that, I think you can get through the depression and leave it behind rather than just medicate forever.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I was going to ask you that if you had any regrets or anything that you would do differently. And your thing is maybe not go. And it sucks, right? Because I mean, I think everything happens the way that it needs to for whatever reason, but we didn't have these other options then,
Right.
and I think that's where a lot of people are is the thing that they thought they could trust was the doctor who gave them the medicine that they're now dependent on. And, but now, you are proof, even though you're still taking some medications, but it sounds like you're not as heavily reliant on them because you're seeking out, the ketamine and the other forms of treatment too.
Yeah.
Okay.
100%. Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you this. So you have, a relationship with Brandon. You guys have been together for years. He is so funny. And I know you, and I've seen you and witnessed y'all's relationship, and he seems like such an incredible partner.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to ask questions about him because we didn't get his permission to give his details on this podcast, but I don't know if he also has, depression or ADHD or his own mental health diagnoses. But what has it been like with him? And for anybody who is listening who has something that they're dealing with and has a partner who may or may not also be dealing with it, what would be your advice? Because it seems like you two are such a strong front together, such a united team, especially when it comes to your treatments. Like, he's super hands-on and helpful with Josie. So what would be your advice there, maybe in forms of communication and honesty? And what would you say?
That's such a good question, and such an important part, because one of the main things I believe is that when you are confronted with whatever your thing is, mine was depression, I do not believe that you can get through it alone. I think that you have to do it with someone or some people. For me, my closest person in my circle was Brandon. And what surprised me the most, and what I would tell anyone listening, your people that are closest to you are not going to be that surprised. Your people that are closest to you are going to have already picked up on little indicators, subtle as they may be or not so subtle. They are going to know. When Brandon and I have been together for almost 3 years now, and he knew I was on medication for depression. He knew all of that. And I was starting last fall to really struggle again. And I remember where I was standing at my kitchen at the sink looking out the window, and he came up to me and he said, "You're barely hanging on by a thread, aren't you?" Mm. And that gave me the permission right then to say, yes, you're right. This is how I feel. But I think that if you can just go to that person that loves you, that's in your corner, and you just say to them, "I just want you to know how I feel right now, and I do not feel okay." Anyone who loves you and who is in your corner with you will walk through that with you, or help you get started to walk through it. It seems like the biggest bear at the time to let someone else on what you perceive as like a little secret. But chances are they're going to know, and they are probably going to just be so thankful that you finally came to them with it. And then you can move forward. It's almost like that is such a hard part of bringing it up to someone. And when you break through that, then the healing and repair can really begin. And then you can get on the road to figuring out what you want to do about it.
Mm. I'm just so thankful that you guys found each other, because it really does. You guys just have such a beautiful dynamic and relationship. And he seems like the best. Have you ever been in a relationship that wasn't supportive of, or just not open, maybe didn't get it?
Oh, yeah. Yes. It's a funny story. One time I was dating this guy, and we were traveling somewhere, and he was looking for Advil or Tylenol or something. And we were in the hotel room, and I had my toiletry bag there. And within that bag, I was on 2 different medications at the time. And, I said, "There's Advil in there." And he looked at the pill bottles, and was like, I didn't know you were on an arsenal of antidepressant medication. Like, do we need to talk about something? And made it
Arsenal?
an arsenal.
Oh
An
my
arsenal. Those were his words, an arsenal. I'm like, well, there's two, but okay.
Okay.
And made it such a big deal that like we needed to talk about it. And I felt personally attacked for sure.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, you're not the one. Not the one. Not the one for me.
You just tell right away. He's just not a team player.
Yeah.
And Arsenal, man.
Yeah. Okay.
Life's going to give him some disappointments then.
Yeah.
Well, this has been enlightening. And I think one thing that we have to cover before we call it is what it's been like when you started opening up about this.
Mm-hmm.
Because you and I have worked together, and this was not something that you talked about ever.
Yeah.
And then you had this experience. You got in that bout of depression again, and you sought the ketamine treatment. And then it just like, it was almost like a lightning strike of like, wait, I'm meant to talk about this. Like there's a reason, there's a deeper reason here. And I can either ignore that and continue to keep it behind a curtain, or I can own it and stop making it this dirty little secret and just like bring it out, and almost like your strength. And we've talked so much about, I mean, you can look at so many brilliant people that we all know and love who are open about their mental health struggles. And that was that moment for you where you just decided to like come out of the closet in a way. And talk to us about what it's been like when you finally brought it out, and you even kind of shifted your business to support other. Is it just women who deal with these? Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So when I started to really talk about and be open about my struggles with depression, and I remember I had always, it was never a secret that if it came up in conversation that I would never admit to anyone that I took medication or that I, dealt with that. But when I first did the ketamine treatments, and my whole business has always been, well, for the past several years, showing up online. And I thought, gosh, this is such a huge part of my life right now. I felt like I wanted to share it because I felt a little inauthentic if I didn't, because it was such a part of my life. I knew I was going to be going through a series of treatments that were going to be intense. So I remember when I was like, how am I going to share this? And I made a reel the first day that I had an infusion. And I was out in my front yard, and it was like gorgeous sunset. And it was just like that in the background. And I just did it in text and said, today I took the first step of dealing with depression that I have dealt with for close to 15 years. I'm going to take you along on this journey. And then the next few days, I did another one that said, thank you for not canceling me, because that was a fear that I thought that it would be detrimental for my brand and my business to show, hey, I actually have this pretty serious thing that I deal with. But it made me more magnetic to this day, because more people relate than you would ever believe. And it became apparent that this is what I'm supposed to talk about and supposed to do, because it was so easy to help others because I had been there in their shoes. And I know what it's like to feel like they do every day. And so it opened up a world for me that I was not expecting. When I just started to share these things, I was concerned that, what are people going to think? Or what are they going to say? Maybe it'll make people uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe they won't want to work with me because they'll think I have issues. But I said, well, I guess those aren't my people anyway. And the opposite was true.
And what you found was it was a lot of people, like a ton of people who were like, holy crap, I relate to this on some level and deal with the same things and have very similar instances. And I remember so many people were so thankful that you were being open about the ketamine treatments because it's still something new and, that a lot of people don't know a lot about. And it can be scary, right? I can imagine if you're used to taking a certain medication or types of medication and then to go, and especially when your doctor won't co-sign on it for those reasons. And it can be scary to pursue something new and that, probably not radical, but, so different than what you're used to. And I remember witnessing that and seeing so many people just with open arms, almost like, thank you for owning this. Because again, you like gave them permission just to be who they are and not feel like they're less than, which is so silly to say. Like, of course you're not, but I can imagine that would be something up until like people started talking about it more, that people would be so afraid. Yeah. Like I could totally envision if I had depression and talking about it, worried that people wouldn't want to hire me. Okay, holy technology issues. So full disclosure, we're just going to peel back the curtain here. Janna and I were recording now a couple of weeks ago, that episode, which you just heard. And the mic cut out and it was just a freaking nightmare. It was just not a good time. And we both had time constraints and we had to run. So we are back now to wrap up the episode because there were some things that I wanted to discuss, one being your podcast, and I wanted to go a little bit deeper into that. So I'm very excited that we are back. We now have a better setup and situation. Hopefully no issues moving forward. Welcome back, Janna.
Yes, I'm glad we got this situated, but I think it was all for the good. So
all
here
for
we
the
are.
good, for sure. We make it work, Okay. So where we left off is we were talking about how you had started to come out of the closet, so to speak, sharing your honest experience with depression and your experience with seeking therapy and then ketamine treatments. And you had shared that you did reels about your ketamine treatments. And that was a really big moment because in your mind at the time, you felt like your people's perceptions and feelings could have gone one of two ways. And this was your fear at the time. And I remember us talking about this. It was like, okay, on one hand, they could not love that I'm sharing this and it could be negatively detrimental to my brand and how people want to continue working with me in the future. On the other hand, they could embrace it. And what you found was a ton of people fully embraced it. And what I wasn't surprised with at all was you received so much of me too. Like, I get it, so much resonance with people like, wow, thank you so much. I'm so thankful you shared this because I've experienced the same thing, or my kid has experienced the same thing, or a family member or whatever. So you really bridge this gap with the people watching you. And okay, so with that, this kind of started you on this path. And this was like, from my perspective, as somebody who was watching you boldly share your heart and be real and honest and raw, everything shifted from there. It was like and you weren't planning on this. You weren't planning on your business shifting, but eventually your business shifted. You started a podcast, like so many things. This was like you coming out and sharing your truth was a catalyst for so many beautiful things. So let's start there. Like once you started sharing in your content about the ketamine treatments and your depression, talk to me about what you experienced and what led to the podcast and what the podcast is all about and what you want to do in the mental health space.
Yeah. You said it so perfectly that the pieces that I was so scared to share for fear of judgment, fear of personal people in my life that really knew me to finally know that, I was really struggling with this. And then people that have followed me and don't know this side of me at all, what they were going to think. But I just had to rip the Band-Aid off, and I was comfortable with that. I don't think that everyone is meant to share everything, especially this hard, heavy stuff as they're going through it. Some people prefer to wait and share it after they're out on the other side of it. But I am the type of person, it is who I am to my core, to share the mess as I'm going through it, to share those vulnerable pieces of me. And the people that were closest in my circle at the time, they knew what was going on, but I had never really stepped into sharing it in such a public way on a public platform. And I was met with the most open arms from people saying, "Oh my gosh, me too. Oh my gosh, I feel the same way. Thank you, thank you, thank you." And that to me was the little bit of assurance that I needed, that I was beginning to step in to the right direction. And so that encouragement from people helped me so much. And in terms of my engagement, on social media, it was through the roof. And looking back on it, and I knew it then when I really started sharing all of this, 100%. It was the missing puzzle piece, if you will, to the person that I am that was missing, that was not fully showing up every single day in my life and in my business. And that translated into everything, because there was such this part of me that I had dealt with and really struggled with for so long that is not something that's accepted, or certainly not talked about, and certainly not owned, and a lot of the times not talked about until after the fact. But I owned it, and said, I am in this dark place right now, and this is what I'm doing, and this is how I'm feeling. And every single day, every morning when I was going through ketamine treatments, I was showing up in front of my coffee pot in my robe and no makeup. That. My hair was a mess, but it felt like if this person that's watching me walked into my house right now and sat down on my couch with me, this is how I would be. And this is how I would show up and talk to them. And I got more and more and more comfortable with it because people were relating more and more to me. And so once I just showed up who I truly was in all aspects of my life, things really quickly started to click into place. And I just kept having this desire to share more and more and more. And I could only share so much. in terms of a reel or a post or in stories. I just felt like the topic is so deep and rich and personal that it was the most clear thing ever in my business within my brand that has said to me, like, this is the direction you're supposed to go. There was just no question. And that's where I was. Yeah.
As somebody who worked with you pretty closely for a while, and I had the honor of getting to work with you during a pretty pivotal time in your life when you were shifting from, being a pretty big name in direct sales in this company to wanting to do your own thing.
Yeah.
But the thing, it was like, what is that? And we had some ideas, and there were so many things that you could teach because you had mastered those things, but it wasn't quite clicking, not because it wasn't working for anybody else, but for you, it wasn't like, okay, this isn't like, this is cool, but it's not like my passion, and it was, and from my perspective, because I've done this so much, I was like, we're going to find it, we're going to like, we need to test some things out, and you're going to land on something. We're going to find this puzzle piece. And then getting to witness you, and this wasn't a premeditated thing. And I think that was like the coolest piece looking in hindsight at this. This wasn't like, okay, maybe I start talking about this because like, this is just something something, maybe this will work. Maybe this will land. Maybe this will get me more engagement. It was purely from a place of like, if I were to be in my highest integrity right now, if I were to be, and I love how you say, like, if you were to walk into my house right now, how would you find me? And this was the thing. That was the thing that was missing from the conversation. And you just took it on and you owned it. And then getting to witness then how that was the catalyst for so many other things that have now taken place. It has been so fascinating to me because I believe this. I truly, truly believe that all of us here are on this planet for many different reasons, but like we have our things that we are specifically designed to lead a conversation on. And those things are made from our life experiences, what we've been through, what we've done, what we haven't done. It's all led us up to this one point, and for you, part of your story is depression and how you've navigated. That's just part of it. And where a lot of people want to ignore that and put that in the closet and pretend it's not there, you said, nope, this is just part of the package. You want Janna, you're going to get this side of me too. And because of that, it's like this puzzle piece finally was like, now we move on to the next level of life. Now you get to like, this is why you've been through what we've been through. And I know that that's kind of adding maybe, I don't know, more of a positive spin on it than you would want to. And that may not be fair for me to say because I don't feel and haven't felt how you felt. But as an outsider looking in, that's what it's looked like. And I'm just so proud of how you've navigated this and how honest you've been.
Yeah, I hesitate to use the word easy because nothing about this journey in struggling with my depression has been easy in any way. But
did I use the word easy?
No.
Okay, good. I was like, oh God.
I'm prefacing like what
good.
I'm about to say by the word easy, because a lot of times in business, I feel like we hear like it gets to be this easier, like it should be easy to get into your flow, get into your business. Things should come easy to you. And I never felt that way. But once I truly let all parts of me show up, it definitely became easier. Things were flowing. Things didn't feel as difficult to create content around, for instance, because it was who I truly was to the core and what I was really going through in real time. And I didn't have to mask it anymore. And I didn't have to have a reason for feeling this certain way or doing or not doing certain things. That was so hard to keep up with. But once I just showed up and shared all parts of me, for me, it made it so much easier, and things started flowing and things started clicking. And I have shared before with a few people about, how I started my own podcast. It was the clear sign. This is what you need to do. This is the next step for you. Because for years, even when you and I first started working together, I thought, I think I want to do a podcast. But I wasn't quite sure what it would focus on or what the topic would be. And so when I started sharing all of this, it was like, oh yeah, obviously,
yeah,
this mental health topic is supposed to be what the podcast is about. And things just kind of evolved in a much easier way than they were when I was not fully showing up and owning all parts of me.
Yeah. It's like you were wearing a mask, like half of a mask for a while. And
absolutely.
I was just talking about this right before recording this. I was recording an episode with Dr. Wendy O'Connor, and we were talking about how it's so easy to, we were talking about people pleasing and, putting on a mask that we think other people want to see out of fear of being misunderstood, and that leading to maybe depression or something because we're not pleasing people or whatever the case may be. In this case, you showing half of yourself out of fear of judgment, but the funny thing about it is, like, by continuing on that path, if people do fall in love with you, if things do click into place and you do become successful or known, they only know that small part of you. Or in some cases, depending on who the person is, none of you. They just know the mask. They've fallen in love with the mask. So now you have to keep that up if you want to continue with the facade. And that's why a lot of people, you hear of a lot of celebrities, a lot of people that continue to get, or get even deeper bouts of depression or get into really serious trouble when it comes to their mental health. Because it's like, okay, but nobody knows me. I have nobody that I can talk to that will get it. So for you, you said, okay, I'm taking off this mask. This is who I am. And now people, shocker, fell madly in love with the full, real Janna. And I'm not surprised at all. So you started this podcast. It's called Flip the Script.
Yes.
Talk to me about, like, what's your goal with that? And if somebody were to tune into it, what would they hear? What type of conversations would they find there?
So when I titled the podcast Flip the Script, it was because I quickly learned that the conversation around mental health and any sort of mental health issue, depression, anxiety, whatever it is, I knew that conversation, one, needed to change, but two, we needed to talk about it more, because it's such a topic that is, pushed under the rug, or you keep it hush hush because you don't want to let anyone know you have these skeletons in your closet or that you have these struggles. And so I wanted to create a platform where, one, I could just have a longer form connection with people and tell the story of a normal person living a normal life, seemingly high functioning, looks to have a lot of things going in their favor, has a beautiful life, but is struggling with this bear of, for me, depression. And I really wanted to talk about that and normalize the conversation. Because when you're in those struggles, you feel so alone and that no one could ever relate to how you're feeling or what you're going through. So I wanted the podcast to be a place where we could talk about those things and I could share my own personal journey, but also I love having guests on the podcast, and I've had several guests so far who bring in different sort of strengths and topics around their mental health. And so it turns into a conversation of two people who have some common thread on the mental health spectrum and just changing the narrative about it. Like, let's talk about it. Let's not necessarily like normalize it, because I wish we didn't have to normalize these issues, but to normalize the conversation about it, to say like, hey, you're not alone. There are people just like you who are struggling with the same issues that you're struggling with. And that's been the best thing for me, because I only felt like I could only go so deep in the DMs with someone on Instagram and could only share a 15-second clip of here or there, or you could only write so much in a caption. And that's why I love the podcast so much. And I've had so much fun just producing it, because I didn't feel like I wanted to gatekeep any information when it came to dealing with depression and mental health. Because when someone is in that spot, they want connection with someone. And the podcast was the way that I have felt like it's kind of my mark on the mental health space. And I've loved it so far.
And I love too the title, because there's like 3 different ways to look at that title. There's like, okay, flip the script, just the conversation in general, right? Let's take this conversation, let's make it more real, and let's change the narrative, the past narrative and the misconception. So there's that. There's the script in terms of like prescriptions in some cases, which you talk about. But then also I think my favorite is flip the script on looking at whatever mental health situation that you have from a struggle to your strength.
Yeah.
In some cases, not all. Yeah. But, and when I think of you, Janna, that is what I've witnessed you do. And that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing this thing that, not saying you still don't struggle with it, and that, not saying that it's not hard, that it's easy, that's any of those things, but you've taken this thing that was tucked under the bed, and you've now just reframed it as like, this still sucks, but it's part of me. And because you've done that, now you are this go-to leader of these conversations, which is going to support so many other people. So you've taken this thing that was just a struggle for a really long time to now what I would consider one of your superpowers. And I think that reframe is so powerful. And everybody can do this in one way or another. And I'm just so thankful that there are women like you that are bold enough to do this and selfless enough to do this and dedicate so much time and energy to serving other people who can relate on this level. So I just want to say thank you so much just for doing what you do in general and for leading these conversations. And then also thank you too for sitting here with me and sharing your story and your perspective and your heart, because I love you. I've loved you for a long time. And I'm just so excited for other people to hear and fall in love with you as well and go listen to Flip the Script.
Thank you for having me. It is truly an honor to be able to use something that plagues so many people, but to give them some lighthouse of hope. So thank you.
Thank you. You guys go listen to Flip the Script podcast. Go follow Janna. What's your handle? I'm going to tag you in show notes and all the things, but so people can go find you now.
Yes, it's just my first and last name with a dot in between. So JANNA .Cone, CONE on Instagram.
Do you still do your coffee chats?
Yes, I took a little time away from them. I just wasn't feeling it for a bit, but that's my favorite way to show up on stories in front of my coffee pot. It's the best. That's one of my favorite things that you do besides your traveling with B and carrying that ridiculous suitcase. You guys, oh my God,
you have to follow Janna because her boyfriend, Brandon, he's so y'all's dynamic is, we've already shout out to Brandon. He's so incredible, but he's so funny. Y'all two are so funny together, but he gifted Janna this travel suitcase or carry-on suitcase with his face on the full front of the suitcase is his freaking face. And it is so damn funny. And she rocks it. You're just like, whatever. It's more embarrassing for you.
I'm like, I don't think that you thought I would actually carry this, but now I carry it and you have to travel with me. So joke's on you.
I love it. He's such a gem. You guys are so cute together. So that's really fun to watch too. But I love you so much. Thank you for your time.
Love you.
And we'll have you back another time for an update. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.